Alright, so I've been getting into Super Mario 64 DS modding lately. It started off with that abomination I made called Working Title. It featured Pingu, Dr. Kawashima, and Thomas the Tank Engine, set in Twilight House from Mario Kart DS. Now, the reason I chose a map from Mario Kart DS is because it had a decent chance at working in Mario 64 DS, since they're both DS games. In fact, all of those models were from DS games. If I chose a map from Mario Kart 8, I would have to delete most of the vertices and compress the textures into dirt to make it run. But with Twilight House, I didn't need to do any compressing. This mod is funny, but I wanted to make something that was a bit more finished. And I can say that I didn't succeed, I didn't finish it. But here's what I have so far. Waluigi Pinball in Super Mario 64 DS. I ruined it. I originally wanted to make a Ghost Runner mod, but it just wasn't feasible, so this is what happened. Okay, it's not as good as the trailer makes it look. I only had time to set up 2 stars, and only one of them actually works right now. But it's pretty polished. But it's almost polished. It's not polished. It took around 13 hours to get to this point. I'd love to show you all the mechanics and details I've got going. I'm actually kinda proud of it. Basically, the idea is Waluigi Pinball, but platformer now. You might think, well, that just doesn't make sense. You can't take a racetrack and expect it to translate well into a platformer. You're just gonna be running around a racetrack. That sounds super boring. But get this. Yeah. Okay, look, I've been talking this down a lot, but I think it's actually turned into a pretty interesting level. You start off at the top of the track, which just makes more sense here than when you start off in Mario Kart. You work your way down the track and collect coins, but you've got to watch out for the pinballs rolling through. You eventually make it down to the pinball table, or whatever this is called, where you encounter a chain chomp. He can break the gate down here, but it won't be easy to free him. He can also warp through the ground. Remember those pinballs rolling down the track? Well, they're going to be making their way down to the table while you're fighting the chain chomp, making this whole area pretty hectic. If you can free him, he does that, and now you can run through and grab the star. After this star, the warp cannon that was once walled off will now be up and running. You can talk to these less than enthusiastic Bob-omb buddies and open up the cannons. That's right, the warp cannon works. Eventually. It's a multi-stage kind of thing. It isn't very enjoyable. I know this isn't much, but it sure was a process to get it working. I'll show you that second star in a minute, but first let's take a look at how all of this came together. So the first step was easily the worst. All I had to do was download the map and then import it. This took a couple hours, and I honestly still don't know what I did wrong. I kept getting this error after exporting it from Blender, and trust me, I messed with everything there was to mess with. I even started screwing around with the DAE files in Notepad. Eventually, it just worked for no reason, and I made like 1,000 backups to make sure I didn't have to do that again. And then, finally, a different error. I actually understood this one though. So remember how I said you don't have to compress textures if they're from a DS game? That was a total lie. This track had too many high-res textures for 64 DS, so I had to compress the biggest one. The giant Waluigi. I really didn't want to have to do this, but the file was like 30 kilobytes on its own, and the total needs to be under 48. After that, I had to delete a few textures and reuse existing ones in their place. Okay, it loads now, and I fall right through it. After another 30 minutes or so, I was able to walk around on the track. In some places. It might have been wise to get this issue resolved right away, but after all the garbage that I just dealt with, I needed to do something fun. That's important to keep in mind while you're working on stuff like this. It is pretty important that I don't fall through half of my level, but I don't know where to begin solving this. I could try for an hour and burn out, or I could try again later when I have a solution. For now, I'll just start adding things and developing the layout of the level. First things first, pinballs. Luckily, I can use these boulders from Bob-omb Battlefield. Unluckily, I have no clue how to set them up. Eventually, I figured out that they each have a corresponding path, which is assigned in the hex code. Putting a 1 here will make the ball follow path 1. Now I just need to move each and every path node into place. This is a little tedious, but I actually kind of enjoyed it. I also decided to set them up on these rails, including this one behind the glass. I had to modify the geometry of the map a bit, but I made it work. But before doing that, I just moved the chain chomp that was already under the map up here, as well as the gate. While I was working on that glass pinball section, I thought of a solution for those glitchy curves that you get stuck in. I realized that the issue is most likely that the faces are inside out, which ended up being the case. After getting that fixed, I figured I might as well make a cool painting to replace the Bob-on Battlefield one. I went through and added little details and sorta just shaped out the level. I blocked off the warp cannon for the first star with black blocks, so you can't just slide down there and skip the chain chomp. And now it's bubbles instead. This kept happening. Models would just be way wrong for no reason, which meant a lot of restarting the software. Then I started setting up the cannon, which was quite a task. At first, I just set a cannon at the bottom and thought, hey, it might reach the top, but it only got about a quarter of the way. That means I've got to have like 4 cannons, but I need deep level ground to do that. I just bit the bullet and started placing a million black blocks to act as platforms to land and relaunch from. This warp cannon sucks, but I'm just happy it's technically functional. I also gave some funny dialogue to the bob-ons. I started to build a sort of dystopian cyberpunk world with this dialogue, which I'm sure isn't related to the music that I was listening to while making it. How am I not going to type about Waluigi being the corrupt overseer of a corporate metropolis while this is playing? But I'm really glad I had good music to listen to. If you want time to disappear and work to get done, you're gonna want some music going. But I think the most important advice that I can give you is learning from everything that you do. When you come across an issue, think out or even write out everything that could have gone wrong. Then systematically try fixing each issue, starting with the most likely and convenient option, then resorting to the most tedious ones. Alright, that's enough advice. Now for the second star. I originally planned on it being 8 red coins, but they didn't want to work as the second star, so I had to change my plans. I decided to just go with what was the original Bob-on Battlefield second star, Racing Koopa the Quick. I guess a race would make sense in this track. I mean level. It turns out he works just like the pinballs. You just set down some nodes and he follows them. Put the flag down there, put the nodes, boom. No, he isn't able to jump this ramp, so I've got to make it less steep in Blender. Much better. This works, but it doesn't reward you the star for some reason, so I guess it doesn't work. I changed the text here to make it fit the cyberpunk world better. This Koopa is offering to recruit you into the rebellion after he saw what you did to the chain chomp, but he's got to make sure you know your way around, so as an initiation, you've got to get down to the table before he can. Maybe this doesn't fit the Mario universe, but I don't really care. I think it does. Waluigi definitely seems like a futuristic corporate overlord. This was basically all I was able to get done in the 4-ish days I gave myself to work on it. I would have done more, but I've got to make and upload this video the same week, and it's already going to be late, so it's what I've got. My favorite part was actually the writing. I just love turning this stupid level into a world, even if it isn't the best. I also replaced the first time level entering text with this comment that Asher left on the community post. It just seems like it fits. This was a learning experience more than anything though, and I guess I want other people to know that when they go to make something, whatever it is, do it because it's fun and because you want to learn. Please don't get overambitious. Nothing kills ambition like overambition. Start off with something basic. You probably won't even understand the basic processes at first, but if you're persistent and keep experimenting, you'll start to figure things out. You just need base knowledge to build off of. Start off replacing a single texture, or changing a line of dialogue, or replacing Bob-on Battlefield with a cube or something. Oh, and always make backups. It's the only way to keep everything from exploding. I haven't learned anything compared to most of the talented ROM hackers out there. I can't replace music, I can't replace the minimap, heck, one of my 2 stars doesn't work. I can't do most of what these people can do, but I can do way more than I could last week, and I'm really happy about that. And if you do have a great idea for a huge creative project, you can do one of 2 things with it. Shrink it or forget it. Because if you have that perfect project in mind, it's just going to make you feel like you're behind. The only thing worse than not setting any goals is setting unrealistic goals, so start off short term and just strive to learn single concepts or skills. You don't really have the perspective to set realistic long-term goals, so don't even worry about that. You'll get to that perfect project eventually, but also keep in mind that while you can do that someday, you don't have to. You might get an even better idea along the way, who knows? Maybe I'm not making any sense, but I figured I'd just share a few things I've learned from doing this kind of stuff. Maybe it'll mean something to someone. I actually had to reason myself out of working on that Ghost Runner mod because it's way out of my skill range. Because I can't rip its textures, and even if I could, they would probably be unusable here. I would have to make my own textures and the map from scratch, keeping it low fidelity but also retaining the Ghost Runner look. That isn't impossible, but I likely wouldn't have anything to show after 4 days at my skill level. But hey, look! I was still able to make my Cyberpunk Mario 64 level. I just went with something that was much more feasible for me, and I got to have Waluigi. I of course plan on finishing this level at some point, but I want to explore some Mario Kart 8 tracks next week, so it'll just be a little while before I get back to this. I've got a link in the description for the patch if you want to play what little there is to play right now. I'll also have the patch for working title, but be warned, both of these mods completely destroy Whomp's Fortress. Sorry. I actually wanted to have Waluigi Pinball be the second level of working title and slowly turn that into a full ROM hack, but for whatever reason, Whomp's Fortress wasn't wanting to work. I still want to put these two maps together and continue expanding until working title is a full ROM hack, but it doesn't really matter right now. I really appreciate you checking this out. I'll see you later. Thanks.